Goeiedag, good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world.
I've been looking around for salvation. I've been looking around for the truth. All around me I see frustration, and I looked all over till I found you. I sit and listen to your stories, and you're telling me, please don't worry. Lot in this world you should know, and love in life is where you should go. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you, then love in life will guide you.
Goeienaand, good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world, and welcome to tonight's live stream with Kallie Kriel, who heads up Afriforum. But before I get Kallie on, just a few little admin things that we need to quickly cover. The first one was that the video archives were targeted last night, your time, with a denial of service attack. And it's interesting that just a couple of days before, I'd been speaking to Laurie about cybercrime on a live stream, and I can tell you now that the video archives are back and operating perfectly. It's just a bit of a frustrating thing to go through, and just a nasty little attack, but anyway, we've dealt with it. Everything is back to 100%. Now, tomorrow morning, 8:30 a.m., that's Saturday the 12th of February, I'm going to be covering the Independence March in Cape Town. So if you are up and about on Saturday morning, come in and join us. Michelle and Diana are going to be our roving reporters covering the event live. So that's 8:30 a.m. tomorrow morning. All right, now tonight I'm going to be talking to Kallie Kriel, as I mentioned, and we're going to be talking about what's happening in South Africa with a large emphasis on Eskom and electricity. So without any further ado, let's get Kallie on and let's get the show on the road. Here we go. Hi Kallie, great to meet you.
Yes, good day, Scott. At last I speak to you. It's a privilege speaking to you.
Oh, well, thank you. Look, I've been doing this for years, and I've always wanted to get to know or get closer to Afriforum, because I think you're one of those organizations that are on the right track. But before we go there, please tell me a bit about your background.
Yes, I'm actually born and bred in Pretoria, which is in the northern part of South Africa. I mainly went to school here, went to university here, got married here, and have 4 children that all stay in Pretoria. I initially studied to be a teacher, and I've got a master's in political geography. So I was a teacher at a high school for 3 years, but then of course I've always had I always wanted to play a role to make sure that there is a future for Afrikaners.
Yeah.
And that made me interested in political issues, but also realizing that because of demographics in the country, political parties play an important role as opposition. But I then felt that together with my colleagues in the Solidarity movement that we can play a bigger role outside of party politics and trying to unite our people where political barriers don't play a dividing role as it has played in the past amongst Afrikaners, and uniting people on those issues that they agree upon to make sure people agree that their neighborhood should be safe. And if they disagree on a number of other issues, it doesn't matter, then they work together on that issue. So that's broadly the basis that Afriforum is built on, to say we want to build a future for Afrikaners here on the southern tip of Africa, where we can be free and prosperous and safe. Those are the things we need to achieve. Of course, we don't live in isolation in this country, so we also believe that we should foster mutual recognition and respect with other cultural groups.
Sure.
But also on the basis that there is a place for Afrikaners, there is a place for Zulu people, and it's in the interest of all if we respect one another. So those are the two-pronged approach that we have. And then, of course, also in terms of then influencing what is happening in the country, there are alpha and beta factors that you can do nothing about, then focus on those issues that you can make a difference. And broadly, we fight injustice and corruption, but then build alternatives to make us self-reliant, where we are not, in the end, at the mercy of a corrupt and incompetent government.
Yeah. Look, when I first heard of Afriforum, it was because of Ernst Ruth's book, Kill the Boer. And, that had a huge impact on I grew up in South Africa. I actually went to boarding school in South Africa. And I only came across to Australia back in the 1980s. But getting to your a couple of things you said, you said you have a master's in political geography. What is that?
Yeah, it's actually just a nice name. Geography as a subject is about time and space and demographics.
Yeah.
And I decided to look at a political issue using the principles of geography, which includes demographics. And what I specifically focused on, how can minorities be accommodated in society?
Yeah.
And you have numerous examples across the world. For instance, you have Quebec in Canada, you have the Flemish part of Belgium, you have the canton system in Switzerland. But if you go and have a look at all those examples, as well as other examples, the one issue that prescribes what solution can work is demographics. You cannot, and that is why Afrikaners have a demographic problem in the country.
Yeah.
Not that they are too few. If you say that there's about 2.7 million Afrikaners, there are many countries in the world that have a population that are less than that. But the problem is that these 2.7 million people are spread all over the country, where they are actually, in terms of numbers, a very small minority. So if we want to create a future for Afrikaners, then we have to solve the demographic issue. And in a sense, we're seeing that it's happening naturally already. You have Afrikaners on their own moving in large numbers to the bigger centra. So you have, for instance, Pretoria, which is the biggest concentration of Afrikaners that exist. More than 500,000 of them live here, but that number is growing. If you look at Nelspruit, the number of Afrikaners are growing, and the number of regional centra, even a place like Urania, the numbers are growing. And then the question is, why does that happen? Because there's not a boom in the birth rate amongst Afrikaners. And the reason is simply because of the deterioration of infrastructure and corruption in the smaller towns and the decay of those towns. Yeah. Then people move naturally to the bigger centra. And that, of course, then provides us with new options for a solution. And we speak about anchor towns, or anchor communities, where simply with regard to the economy of scale, if you have a concentration of 500,000 of Afrikaners in one area, then it is viable to set up a university in that community.
Absolutely.
It is viable.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you built a university for 300 million rand when I think the ANC government couldn't build a bridge across a 3-meter river for about the same amount of money. I mean, that kind of sums up what's going on, doesn't it?
Yes, and I must of course say that the Soltech, which does the artisan training, was built by our colleagues in Solidarity, but we are proud to be with them in the same movement. But you'll see on the social media, especially from black communities, many of them on Twitter have used this argument to say that Panyaza Lesofie has spent 431 million to sanitize schools during COVID. And for much less, you can now drive past Soltech. But what is important by an example such as Soltech, remember Afrikaners over many years have heard a lot of promises and have become skeptic with regard to, and rightfully so. People are skeptic, and you should question, of course, what is happening around you. But I think what Soltech has done, it has actually become a monument to say that it is possible to build our own cultural infrastructure. Yeah. Because if you say to people it's possible, they all say, oh, that would be great. But if you have it standing to say, okay, we've now done this. If we were able to do this, we as a community can start setting up our own schools, we can start setting up our own old age homes, we need to build further on our own welfare, help mekaar, support one another initiatives. So that was actually a great moment for us to show to people it is practically possible. But of course, we realized this is just the beginning. There's still lots and lots of work that needs to be done. But because we know it is possible, we can start building, and the next generation can build further. And we believe in what Edmund Burke wrote already in the 1700s. He says the current generation, we are not simply just individuals that swift around over the world. There's a contract between those that lived before us and those that are yet to be born. And if you realize that you have this calling, which is an important role to play, then you are willing to now build, you're willing to plant a tree that even in your life span you would want to taste the fruit and sit in the shade. But even if you don't achieve everything in your lifetime, at least you know that your children and those that are yet to be born will bear the fruits of the building we're doing now.
Yeah. Look, I want to tell you that I've always believed that different cultures have different roles to play in a community. And I want to give you an example of that. And this is so far out of South Africa, you won't believe it. But if you look at Fiji, I go to Fiji quite a lot. It's a beautiful set of islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and the Indian community have settled in Fiji. Now, they can't own property, but they are very, very astute, and they build businesses. And you got this amazing interaction between the traditional Fijian people who live in villages. They don't own much. They're just happy to go and, take coconuts off the trees and stuff like that to eat. And you've got the Indian community who've literally taken over the entire business operation in Fiji. That's what's going on there. Now, if we transplant that into South Africa, you've got the Afrikaner, the white community, who've got this desire to do or build things like you have done with this university or this higher education place for skills. And you've got this other culture, which is the Nguni Bantu people, who seem to be more into living a life around the kraal, and they've got a totally different cultural look, and I don't know how you reconcile the two. This is my problem. I think this is what went wrong in 1994, because you had the ANC coming in and basically stealing everything out of the cookie jar. I'm talking about the guys at the top, and they've completely screwed the country. And this is why we're talking about what's happening now with Eskom and electricity and stuff like that, because they've completely destroyed a state-owned enterprise which was so incredibly strong, highly profitable, but they put their cadres in there and they've just screwed it. So, what are your thoughts about that? It's just they're two different understandings as to what life is all about, and it's like getting oil and water to mix.
No, well, I think in terms of our worldview, I think the mistake is if people tend to believe the West is the best, and of course, if you're proud of your own culture, you think that your way of doing things is the right way. But yeah. I think a big problem is that when you start to prescribe to other communities
exactly
what is best for them, and I think real respect is to say, I don't necessarily think that a communal lifestyle or communal land ownership would be the best for an Afrikaner community to prosper. But in terms of real respect, and I think there one should be very cautious not to look down on other cultures.
I'm not suggesting one looks down. It's just the differences.
I'm not saying that you said so. I just in terms of a broad worldview, and then to say, well, if we respect that way of living, then of course you can always then say people should respect how you are. And that is, as actually in terms of Afrikaner history, there's been a long tradition of looking at ways to even cooperate. There's this fallacy that the voortrekkers came in and stole all the land, which, if you look at the reality, when the voortrekkers moved in. Yeah, but even before that, when the voortrekkers moved in to the Free State, there was the Marokka, the Seleka Barolong, or Barolong Bu Seleka, who had a King Marokka. There was an agreement between him and the voortrekkers for mutual assistance.
Yeah.
And the voortrekkers then defeated Mzilikazi, who was actually had a reign of terror in the central part Yeah, and there was cooperation on many occasions. So what we are doing now is not something that is foreign to our culture. Is to say, well, we are proud of who we are. We want to build a future here
Yeah.
for our children, and we need to make sure that this whole issue of self-reliant community is starting to take ground in the country amongst all communities. Because if you look at the terms, if you speak about the Xhosa people in their language, they have a term called Vukuzenzele, which says stand up and do it yourself. In Afrikaans, we say ons sal self, we will do it ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think if we can, because nobody should look to government for assistance. Well, you can, but you're not going
Good
to,
luck.
to
Good
get
luck.
it. So the best is what we can do is to promote this self-help culture, firstly amongst our own community, but then also work with those communities that also want to help themselves.
Yeah. Well, look, I know a lot about history. I've been studying history all my life, and when I think of the Afrikaner people, I think of the Amish people in Pennsylvania, which is near to New York. I actually went and visited people in the Amish community, and they live lives like back in the 1800s. They don't use electricity. They actually, I've seen it. They go around with a horse and cart. That's how they travel. They have not compromised the way they live at all. And when I think of the Afrikaner, the Boer, these people who've basically stuck to their traditional values, and I think that's an incredibly important thing, because they haven't been sailed down the river by all the shit that the television programs push out there.
Yeah.
You know, they've stuck to their values, and I think this is the incredible strength that the Afrikaner population have. I think that through this adversity, it's ironic, because we know what happened with the Battle of Blood River, with the Day of the Vow and all those sort of things. And okay, so let me just see, everything's recording. Okay, so we're back. So we were just talking about how I see the Afrikaners rather like the Amish people, that they were basically a lot of them were forced out of Europe because of their religious beliefs, and they moved into South Africa, and all they ever wanted to do was have their own little territory where they could live and build and be a community. And at every turn they've been thwarted. If you look at the history, I mean, it's an extraordinary history, and that's why I love the concept of Arania, because once again they're developing this whole thing where you've got and of course what's happening in parts of Pretoria as well. But yeah, if you go ahead, I got see you were going to say something. Go ahead.
Yes, no, well, I think the difference between, for instance, the Amish community and the Afrikaners, or let me say the correlation is in terms of values that are important, is the correlation. But I think the difference is what one of the great leaders in Afrikaner history, Kallie Kriel, said. He said, take what is best or good from the past and build a future upon it.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? What that means is not to simply take the past and just continue living as the past was. You take what is good from the past. That means our core values in terms of Christianity, social conservative values, and those things that are good. But then you build a future upon that, and I think also what makes the Afrikaner successful in more than 300 years on the southern tip of Africa was also adaptability without losing your core values, and modernizing without losing your core values. And you know, if you take the first Anglo-Boer War in the 1880s, you had a General Pichu Bear, who was a legend, the head of the armed forces, and in the end we won that war against the British.
Yeah.
When the second Anglo-Boer War came, or the second Freedom War, that same person that was the hero failed dismally because he wanted to apply tactics that worked 20 years earlier in a later stage. And you had somebody like General De La Rey coming with new ideas to say, we need to dig trenches. And the whole idea of trenches being used in war actually was used for the first time here by that Boer general. So our challenge is now to say, okay, we are proud of what the successes our ancestors achieved, but we live now in new circumstances. We have technology that has changed the playing field. Just in a sense, as we speak now, to get out our message, we should utilize technology to the fullest. We should see what adaptations we should make to our strategy to make sure that we are geared to have to make a success in the current circumstances, plan for how society will change over the coming years and how we will be able to adapt our strategy, but then stick to your core values. And I think that is the big difference between the Amish and Afrikaners. Our people are mostly urbanized, they have modernized.
Yeah, they have been.
But without losing our core values, which I think is a great asset, and I'm proud of the fact that was able to happen.
Yeah, when you mentioned General De La Rey, the name Sina van Rensburg came into my head, and I've read the books about Sina van Rensburg. I've read all his prophecies and stuff like that. Extraordinary man. Now, Kallie, before we get on to the electricity grid plans that Afriforum have, there's something I do need to talk to you about, and that is on social media it's like a cesspool. Okay, you've got all sorts of misinformation going on, and I have a huge amount of respect for Afriforum and Solidarity. In fact, I've spoken to several people of Solidarity on live streams in the past, and in fact I think there's a painting in one of your boardrooms with a protea which actually came from Loving Life. I don't know if you knew that, but that's where it originated. We had an auction, and that the person who bought it said, "No, I wanted to go to Afriforum," and it was actually during a conversation with someone from Solidarity, and that's how I landed up there. But now I want to talk about some of the things that people are saying out there, and the suggestions are, and look, F.W. de Klerk is not someone that a lot of people in the Afrikaner community are very happy with because of what happened. And then we got also the Oppenheimers, who are obviously the big mining moguls who are, basically screwing the country, raping the country for the gold and whatever. The suggestion has been made that somehow Afriforum is being funded by these organizations. Do you want to respond to that?
Yes, no, I definitely want to. Well, it's ludicrous. If we've never received the cent from the F.W. de Klerk Foundation, we have no links with them. Nico Oppenheimer, I've never met. He has never given us any money. So you have all these conspiracy theorists, and one needs to ask the question, why? Why is this being done? If somebody wants to come to the fore to say, we want to build a solution, we want to build a future for our children, and then people that don't actually do anything, they don't build universities, they don't build schools, they don't build cultural infrastructure, they don't put up neighborhood watches. We have 165 neighborhood watches to look after the safety of the communities where our members live. And you do all these things, and people just start attacking you from the side without them doing anything. You just ask yourself why. And then I don't want to go into conspiracy theories because I'm not a conspiracy theorist. But then you can say, well, maybe people are just believing conspiracies. But one should also look at this information strategies that are being used by government all over the world, where, you know, if they don't like somebody, the best way to get rid of them is to try and discredit them. People should just be cautious of these agents that are among us that spread disinformation. And I just say, judge us by our deeds. Is it good for Africa? Good that the Helping Hand provides study assistance of more than 50 million rand a year? Is it good that we have 165 neighborhood watches? Is it good that we have court cases against a corrupt government? Is it good that we're looking for electricity solutions? And if it's not good, then fine. But if you think that is good, don't fall into this trap of these small issues. We've got a much bigger task ahead of us, and judge us by our deeds. And I can say to you, I can't even remember when last I spoke to somebody of the F.W. de Klerk Foundation. So I don't know where it comes from, but I take it with a pinch of salt. And what we also realized, remember, we don't only get these attacks from the far right, we get it from the extreme left as well, where you have all these accusations that we are racist. So you will have from the far right saying that we are leftists or liberals, and then from the other side, they would say we are racist. So we actually used to these two small groups attacking us. But what we do realize is that the vast majority of Afrikaners are proud of their culture. They want to build a future for their culture, but they also want to promote mutual recognition and respect. And in a sense, the attacks on us from the lunatic fringe actually galvanizes the majority of Afrikaners behind what we're doing, because, you know, some would have thought maybe, are these guys really racist? But if from extreme points you are being attacked, then people say, okay, no, well, these guys actually must be fine. So I'm complaining about those attacks. Sometimes it's good in positioning us, but it's a pity that it's based on lies.
Yeah, look, there's so much misinformation out there. Now, you touched on electricity, and but the reason we're doing this as a pre-recording is because of electricity, and you know, my personal assistant who lives in Krugersdorp, you would have spoken to her, Marlena. She has 12 hours a day without electricity. It's absolutely chaotic. I mean, the country is being completely screwed by this. Look, this is my words, not your words. I call them the corrupt gangster ANC government. Now, what are the options to actually get around such a disgusting representation of the people?
Yeah, well, I think you're right. We are governed by a crime syndicate in the country at the moment, and the consequence of that is that we have a collapse in terms of our infrastructure. in all spheres. But I think what makes electricity so prominent is that you experience it in the privacy of your own home. And I think that is what makes people despondent. You can put up an electric fence to make your house safer and those kind of things. And now this incompetence comes right into your living room when you don't have electricity. But as with all the other issues that we need to solve, we need to go back to the basic thing that drives us, and that is self-reliance, and ons ourselves, we will do it ourselves.
Yeah.
Because if you don't make a mind shift in that direction, and you say, well, I hope that Eskom would be built up again to its former glory. I hope that the government would, of course, that laugh is quite appropriate if people think that. But you can imagine how despondent you will then get if you look at somebody like Gwede Mantashe, and well, there's even now they're saying they want Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma maybe to save Eskom. And if you see that, you will be so despondent. So if you make the mind shift to say, I'm not looking for solutions towards them, I'm looking for solutions towards ourselves, then it's actually a liberating, and you get energy. And that's why we've built this free phase, or throughout this free phase plan. So the first one is what can we do in the short term?
Right.
And fortunately, there's been a lot of progress in terms of technology. You would know also in Australia, where there's been huge programs in terms of the battery farm that was put up there by Tesla, people using renewables such as panels, solar panels that are being used. So that technology is also available to us. And we should make our private homes as self-sufficient or self-reliant as possible. And that's why in the last 2 weeks, we brought out a guide document for our members in layman's terms, giving them information on solar and battery technology and what you should be on the lookout if you want to become self-reliant at your home. And the reason for that being, solar is now the new gold rush in our country, with everybody that now, not everybody, but many people have just now become installers, and everybody has become experts. Not really, but they portray themselves as experts. And you should be cautious in this kind of situation. So that's why we drew up that guide document and just made it available to our members and anybody else that wants to have a look on it on our website. So at least they know what to be on the lookout. And then we also say to people, if you're going to get an installer, look at an installer that is accredited by the different organizations that there are, where they have to write an exam, so at least you know you've got the right people there. But unfortunately, it is still expensive, and many people can't afford that. So this is not the only solution that we should look at. But now we should say, okay, if people can't afford it, what are the options? And what we're working on is financial models and funding models to say you rent to buy. So people that pay electricity towards Eskom already pays. And then you should say, okay, and we have an actuary that worked out the model for us. If you say, right, if I now pay, for instance, 3,000 Rand for electricity, but if I do the following, it would cost me a certain amount of money, I can bring down the electricity account to 1,000, for instance. So that 2,000 that I save, how long would it be for that 2,000 to pay off what I invested in the infrastructure? And if you build that model correctly, and you can get a rent-to-buy system, so people don't have to put up the cash up front. They pay on a monthly basis as they would have paid Eskom in the end to fund that. So those are the kind of models. Of course, Afriforum, we're not into finance and so, but what we can do is to facilitate and to get those solutions. But also because even that might not also still bring the solution for everybody. So what we need to do is also to alleviate the pressure on the grid, and that we can do through court cases. Let me give you an example. There's in terms of what is being paid to people, sorry about that, to people that produce extra electricity. It's less than R1 being paid per unit for people that produce extra electricity. But then it's not an incentive. Let's take, for instance, if you have a big shopping center with lots of roof space, and you have to invest a certain amount for solar panels to provide electricity for your own use, and you might just have to use half of your roof space to get there.
Yeah.
And you can only sell for less than R1 a unit. It's not worth your while now to invest more money because it won't be a good investment. So, it's actually quite harsh because we would want cheap electricity, but in this sense, you actually need to make sure that people that provide extra electricity gets the same payment than the IPPs, the independent power producers that are set up specifically to provide electricity to the grid. Because if you bring that, there won't be, the free market will simply fill the gap. If you know that you can invest in providing electricity and will be worth your while, you would instantly get huge numbers of people coming into the grid automatically to alleviate that. And then secondly, we have to take on the Electricity Regulatory Act in the country.
What about NERSA?
Yes. Well, in terms of NERSA, but the NERSA also acts through an act. So, for instance, in Frankfurt,
they approved a 19% increase in the price of electricity this year when you got stage 6 load shedding. I mean, that's bullshit.
No, of course, that is terribly so. So we're also taking on that. But the thing is, you need to actually be able to get rid of reliance from Eskom, because I'll come to our medium stage solution. But in terms of that solution, those people that run that system, they don't bring in the tariff that NERSA says. They bring it in lower. So that is terrible. But of course, in terms of the regulations, there's you have regions where, for instance, Eskom has control. So if you want to provide in that same area, you actually have to get permission from Eskom, and they don't want to provide it. So what we are actually seeing is people want to provide electricity. Eskom refuses, but they are unable to provide it themselves. So we need to take on that in terms of the constitution, that you've got the freedom to do your work, the job you pleases, and what Eskom does and these regulations does, it stops us from doing your job. So it infringes on a basic right. So that is the phase 1. And that is something we can do on the short term. The medium term, in the medium term, I believe that there is not too much intervention that we need to make, for instance, in the Western Cape, because in the Western Cape, you have municipalities that pays Eskom, stable municipalities, who, not corruption-free, but where corruption is not on a big scale as we're seeing in the north.
Huge scale.
And what that brings stability for investors. So you would already see that the city of Cape Town has put out tenders for companies to tender to provide electricity, and they will get that. And I think in terms of many parts of the Western Cape will be load shedding free when that comes to the fore. But the problem then is in the central and northern parts of the country, where you have corrupt municipalities. If you look overall, only 10% of municipalities get a clean audit, and most of them are in the Western Cape. So if you have a corrupt municipality without the necessary skills, and you now say to the private sector, get involved there, nobody would, because if these municipalities owe Eskom more than 60 billion rand, if they don't pay Eskom, why would they pay the private sector that provides electricity? So that there we need to have an intervention, and we have now spoken a lot with one company that works in this space. It's called Rural Free State. It's in the Mafube municipality, a town called Frankfurt, and few other surrounding towns.
Tell me about Frankfurt. What's happening there?
Yeah, it's got a corrupt municipality, deteriorating infrastructure in terms of roads and water and all these things. But in one area, I think they're ahead of other towns in the north in terms of electricity. And simply what happened there before the Magashule era in the Free State, Magashule is a corrupt politician in South Africa, for those that don't know.
The old Secretary General.
Yes, yeah. Well, he actually it was actually, as you said just now, he was the head of the mafia government in the Free State. But before his time, there was a municipal manager in the Mafube municipality that municipality agreed to sign a 25-year agreement with this company to actually run the electricity infrastructure. So they upkeep the infrastructure, they do the revenue collection, when they get the revenue, they pay Eskom and they pay the municipality what is due to them. And they then also, in terms of upholding the infrastructure, they've got metering systems. So if there is an illegal electricity connection, they see the spike and they can follow it up. By simply doing things just as it should be done, taking out corruption, getting the revenue collection higher, and upkeeping the infrastructure and paying Eskom. In terms, they've paid now for the last 11 years, everything the rural bought from Eskom, they've paid for. So there's not a backlog there. So it does tell you that if you move in, let the private sector move in, it can work. But the left or the socialists will also always tell you if the private sector gets involved, they want to make huge amounts of money and there will be an escalation of prices. And this Frankfurt example actually shows the total opposite. What has happened here, simply because your revenue is better and you've taken out corruption out of play, their electricity is cheaper than that of surrounding municipalities. So what we are doing is to draw up this blueprint, and then we need to get communities in other towns putting pressure on their local governments to go that route. Would it be easy? Not at all. The fact is these officials at these municipalities wants to have their fingers in the cookie jar or the hand on the wallet, and they will fight. They will fight. Yeah, they will fight to keep that right. But of course, if in terms of history, if we just said, well, because it's going to be hard, we'll just accept the status quo, then we all would have still lived in the Middle Ages. So we need to continue driving that process for decentralization of power, for privatization. And in the end, we're not going to have another company similar to Eskom. What I foresee is you need to decentralize so that in nearly every town you have electricity providers.
Right.
Because the problem is so huge. It's, if you say, how do you eat the elephant? You piece by piece. We need to break up this huge problem into smaller parts.
Yeah.
And then get communities and the private sector to on a scale, on different places, different people taking on the problem, then you'll be able to solve it. So decentralization is part of this, the core part of the solution.
Well, look, I couldn't agree with you more. When I think of the amount of cables that have been literally chopped out of these big structures where they actually put the power from one part of South Africa to another, when the load shedding happens, if Eskom goes down, there won't be any cables left. You've got so many syndicates out there just stealing cables that'll be the end of electricity in South Africa. So decentralized electricity has got to be the way to go. And there's one outstanding community which I love. I know Joost from the Orania movement very well. We've had a few live streams with him, and one of their big things right now is to build their own solar array that they're going to be able to provide their whole community with electricity. They've just providing 500 more lots of land. They're growing incredibly fast out there at Orania. And I just take my hat off to the guys, because the innovative spirit is just incredible.
Yes, most definitely. I've also visited that solar farm that they have already put up.
Yeah.
They're already providing for 30% of the need for electricity in the town. And they're now going to, of course, increase that. So it's also in terms of phases. They are now also looking at battery technology. In terms of, I think the big challenge in terms of electricity is not necessarily generation anymore, it's storage. And because you have a fluctuation in when the sun shines and those things you all know. But I think the Orania model is actually a great example of self-reliant communities.
Yeah.
And that is, if you look at South Africa at the moment, it's more or less as big as Western Europe. So, and I think the electricity is only a symptom of a much bigger problem. Is you have a unit that is ungovernable if you have an incompetent central government. And if you just tell people, for instance, somebody in Rome should decide how policing should be run in Amsterdam, people would say that is ludicrous, because but if you look at more or less the number of kilometers or miles between those two towns, it's the same as the mileage or the kilometers between Pretoria and Cape Town, for instance. And that is the failure of this government. There's actually a word to describe them, a kistocracy. And it means a government by the worst. And so in terms of that, that's why we're seeing failures, not only in terms of electricity, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of policing. So we need to go back and say we need to federalize our society, build smaller units that can become self-sufficient. And Orania is a good example of that.
Yeah, well, what you've just said is just, I think, the answer. It's like in Switzerland where you got the cantons, and You've got like little communities where they run their own little community, and they have their own electricity grid, and they have their own. Yeah, I think that's got to be the answer. And I think, in fact, on this Saturday, the 11th, I'm going to be covering a march by the independence movements to free Western the Cape from the this corrupt government. Now, I want to portray you two scenarios which I think kind of sums up South Africa. In 2016, Ramaphosa got up before the whole nation in one of his family meetings, addressed to the nation, and declared that there was a huge block of land near Lanseria that they were actually developing as a smart city. He actually said that. Now, here in Orania, you've got this small community which is just working hard, actually doing stuff, not just talking crap. By the way, I called Ramaphosa Hippo Eyes and Pinocchio, and more recently the bullshit artist. But that's that's my perspective again. But I got some video footage of Lanseria where they're building this smart city 6 years ago. It's crickets. Not one piece of earth has been turned. Nothing's happening. And you look at Orania, where it's just growing, and they're now developing 500 new blocks for people to go and stay in. People are pouring to Orania because they're doing stuff. They're not just talking crap like this ANC government. It must be so frustrating for you, because you hear the Ramaphosa get up there and say, we're going to be doing this, that, and the other, and you know he's talking crap.
Yes, I think what you said is true, and it's actually ludicrous if you now want to build a smart city, but you're not able to get
electricity.
Yeah, you don't.
Really? Where's the logic in that? Kallie?
Yeah, you cannot fix potholes and those kind of things. But I think in terms of the mind shift I spoke earlier, is you can, if you hear these kind of things, best is to smile and wave and go on getting the job done.
Actually getting something happening, yeah. Well, like you guys have done with that educational centre. I mean, I when I heard about that and how it's huge. I mean, this is not just some little suburban house. This is a huge complex, and the amount of money you expend on that, I mean, obviously every cent was catered for. And I've got a photograph of an ANC bridge, which is very sad. You've got the three guys standing on the bridge, because that's only how wide it is, and it cost them something like 30 million rand to build this thing, which is about 2 pieces of timber on a couple of struts. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Mate, look, I know you're busy, and I know you've got stuff you need to get into. Look, I just want to say it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I follow Afriforum closely, and we actually have a forum on Loving Life TV. Our average live stream, once we take it off YouTube and put on Loving Life TV, just to give you some context, gets over 10,000 views. So we got a huge audience, and I would love to invite Afriforum, and I'm talking about if you've got like newsletters you send out to people and you're happy for them to be public, for you to be in contact with my admin in charge of the forum, and you could send those newsletters to her, and she would put them up on the forum on your own section within the forum. And how it works is every day I send out a daily email, and on the email you've got the videos I've put up, you've got the live streams we're doing like tonight and tomorrow night, and then you've got the forums, and every new forum item is put into that email. So let's say you put up a story about whatever, that would automatically go into that newsletter, which goes out to our audience, which is huge. So if you'd like to be part of that forum, just let me know, and
Good.
and I will put you directly in touch with Nat. You can get one of your staff to contact me, or Marlena, and we'll put you up there. And because I think you guys are doing amazing work. All right.
Thank you.
Now, Kallie, is there anything you'd like to say just in wrapping this up? And I'm wrapping this up only because I know you're busy, and I don't want to take up your time.
No, well, I think if you look at our ancestors, the challenge we're experiencing now is not the first challenge that we've met on our road. So in history, one tends to look back in history with regard all these big figures, and you think of them as people that were without faults and people that were perfect. Of course, they were all just human like us.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you have a goal and you have a calling to say there's something we need to achieve, and the calling has a great effect. It allows normal people in very hard circumstances to achieve extraordinary success. And in that sense, if you take energy from what we've overcome in the past, there's no reason why this current generation can't also overcome these challenges. It means we need to remain positive, but not naive. Look at what is wrong in the eye, but not to become despondent and to say we will be able to overcome this. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard work.
Yeah.
But the only harder thing than not taking on and solving these challenges is to live with these challenges. Or maybe I should not call them challenges, with these huge problems, because we have it actually becomes a joke if the government, there's a huge problem, they just say we're experiencing challenges. So I'm sorry I used those terms. It's not, there are huge problems, but we will overcome them by working hard, having a future vision, having energy, and being positive. And I'm looking forward to the future. We're better off than 20 years ago. And people might say, how can you say that 10 years ago there was electricity and everything? We know that socialists destroy the society. So 20 years ago, we knew what was coming today, and we had no alternatives in place. Now that it has come, I'm more positive because at least we don't need to start from scratch. We have cultural infrastructure in place that provides us with the tools to build a better future.
Yeah, look, keep up the great job that you guys do. I'm thrilled to be speaking to you, and I do admire Afriforum immensely. And just say to Ernst Rutz that he owes me an email.
Okay, no,
I sent Ernst Rutz an email a couple of years ago, and I've never got a response. I know he's a busy man, but
no, I'll definitely.
All right, Kallie, and thank you. And look, I loved your discussion with Muzi and Kosi the other day.
Okay,
because Muzi is actually one of the people who is a regular on Loving Live TV. There's so many little intersections happening here. It's very interesting. Yeah.
Okay, great.
All right.
Scott, have a great day.
Yeah, take care and have a great evening, mate. Good to speak to you.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Bye. Bye. All right, guys. That was, of course, Kallie Kriel.
Please remember to register on lovinglivetv.com to be kept.
Okay. All right. That was Kallie Kriel, and I really enjoyed our chat, and we covered a lot of ground, which is great. I'm going to go out with Hier Bly Ek Boer, and thank you to the moderators for keeping an eye on the side chat. And don't forget, 8:30 tomorrow morning, Johannesburg time, we'll be covering live the march in Cape Town by a group of independence thinking people. So hope to see you then. And don't forget, Sunday night, 8 p.m, we've got a discussion about pit bulls, and it's going to be quite a fiery one, I think, because I understand the NSPCA are going to be debating Yusuf Ismail, which will make life very interesting. Alrighty, see you tomorrow morning or Sunday night or whole of next week. Take care, and here we go out with Hier Bly Ek Boer.
Meer as 61,000 van ons voorvaders het op die grens vir ons gesterwe, sodat ons vry kan wees. Die is my land, die is my reg. Hier is ek boer. Van stof is ek gemaak en sal ek terugkeer. Die Bybel is die woord waaruit ek leer, soos die grond op die aarde. Hier bly ek boer. So diep in die nacht sal die vyand kom, maar hier bly ek staan en ek draai nie om, want jy maak my nie bang nie. Hier bly ek boer. Die is my land waarvoor ek sal veg. Die is my bloed, my sweet, my reg. Die is die plek waar my voorvaders leef. Die is my land, hoor wat ek jou sê. Die is my land, wat my mense voer. Hier bly ek boer. Soos bladam in die somer wat vreugde bring, my oupa wat maniekie kon sing, soos hy stap deur die lande. Hier was hy boer. My wortels lê diep in die grond geplant. My seun soos my pa los ek vir jou die land, en jy hoef nie te vrees nie. Hier sal jy boer. My land waarvoor ek sal veg. Die is my bloed, my sweet, my reg. Die is die plek waar my voorvaders leef. Die is my land, hoor wat ek jou sê. Die is my land, wat my mense voer. Hier bly ek boer. Die sal kom, die leeu 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 sal kom.